My son was fighting cancer when I begged my family for help. They called me unstable, said my kids were everyone else's problem, and kept smiling at their charity event. But 1 year later, my son's recorder made the whole room hear what they really were. My name is Tessara Wrenlow, though most people in Cedar Hollow call me Tess, and I was 33 the night my family taught me that a ringing phone can be a closed door. My 8-year-old son, Boden, was shaking in the back seat with a fever that could turn dangerous fast because the chemo had emptied his body of defenses. My 5-year-old daughter, Merrit, was asleep at home with her red lunchbox beside her bed, the way she kept it when she was afraid I might leave before morning. I needed one adult, not money, not rescue, not sympathy, just one person to sit in my little duplex until daylight so my daughter would not wake up alone while I drove her brother 52 minutes to St. Ansel Children's Center. I called my mother first, then my stepfather, then my sister, then my ex-husband. By midnight, I knew something I would spend a year proving, without ever meaning to prove it. Some people do not fail you by accident. They look at the phone, measure what helping you will cost them, and let it ring. A year later, those same people stood under bright lights at Mercy Hall, smiling like they had helped me survive. My mother wanted her name thanked in my speech. My sister wanted a photo with me. My ex-husband wanted to be called a devoted father. And the woman who had laughed while my son fought for breath wanted everyone to forget what she said when she thought nobody important was listening. But she had forgotten one thing about Boden. My boy loved old weather radios. He recorded everything. And on the worst night of our lives, the truth had been sitting inside a little gray recorder, waiting for the right room to hear it. Before that night, our life was small, tired, and almost organized. We lived in the left side of a pale green duplex on Marrow Street, where the kitchen floor sloped toward the back door and the heat made a clicking sound every time it woke up. I worked nights entering billing codes for a clinic in Altoona and mornings in the Cedar Hollow School cafeteria, wearing a hairnet and serving square pizza to children who still thought lunch ladies knew everyone's secrets. I did not have a career anyone admired. I had hours. I had 2 paychecks that never arrived at the same time. I had a notebook full of due dates, copays, rent, gas, pharmacy balances, and one little column labeled Boden Extras, which meant ginger candies, soft socks, batteries for his radios, and the sour blue ice pops he wanted after chemo. Boden had Ewing sarcoma, a name I learned to say before I learned to breathe around it. It started as leg pain, the kind adults try to explain away because children grow, children fall, children complain when they do not want to put on shoes. Then came scans, then the doctor's careful face, then the kind of words that make the room tilt without moving. Boden was 8, narrow-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and stubborn, in the way sick children sometimes become, because sickness takes so much control from them that they guard whatever is left. He loved storms. He owned 3 weather radios from yard sales, a cracked barometer from the flea market, and a little digital recorder he used to make reports in a serious voice. Storm moving east of Cedar Hollow, he would say from his bed. Possible thunder by dinner. Merrit should stop screaming. Clouds are just moving furniture. Merrit believed him because she believed Boden before she believed anyone. She was 5, soft-spoken and watchful, with a red plastic lunchbox she carried everywhere, even when there was nothing inside it. After Boden got sick, she started filling it with things she thought he might need. A tiny flashlight, 2 crayons, a folded napkin, a toy horse missing one leg, and once, a single piece of toast wrapped in a sock. I kept meaning to laugh more about that. But during those months, laughter had become something I saved for the children, like fruit cups and clean towels. I did not waste it alone. Some people call a mother strong because it saves them from asking what she needs. I used to accept the word like a medal. Later, I understood it was sometimes just a polite way of leaving me to carry furniture through a burning house while everyone admired my balance from the sidewalk. My mother, Vondra Pell, lived 12 minutes away in a brick ranch with white shutters and a wreath she changed for every season. She was known at Mercy Church for remembering birthdays, organizing meal trains, and writing thank you notes with perfect loops in her handwriting. In public, Vondra spoke softly enough that people leaned toward her. In private, she could cut a person down with a sentence so smooth you did not feel the blood until later. My stepfather, Hale, had married her when I was 11 and learned early that peace in our family meant standing behind Vondra and pretending silence was wisdom. My older sister, Sable Norrix, had married Briggs, an insurance agent with polished shoes and a smile he used like a business card. They had a house on the hill, two matching SUVs, and the habit of calling my life complicated whenever they meant embarrassing. My ex-husband, Renner Colt, lived on the newer side of town with his girlfriend Kesslyn Vale, who posted pictures of her coffee before drinking it and called herself a bonus parent online, though she had never sat through one treatment, one scan, or one night of Boden crying because the medicine made his bones ache. Renner was not evil in a dramatic way. He was worse than that. He was pleasant when responsibility was far away, charming when praised, and suddenly unreachable when fatherhood required more than a photo. He paid child support late and blamed the bank, the mail, the economy, or me, depending on which excuse felt freshest. The night everything changed started with Boden saying he was cold. It was late October, windy outside, and the house smelled like laundry soap because I had washed his sheets after treatment day. He was on the couch under two blankets, his weather radio beside him, Merrit asleep in her room with the red lunchbox tucked near her pillow. I touched Boden's forehead and felt heat that made my stomach drop before the thermometer even beeped. Fever during chemo was not a small thing. Fever was a siren. Fever meant his body might not have enough white blood cells to fight what a healthy child could fight in his sleep. I called St. Ansel, and the nurse's voice changed as soon as I gave the number. "Bring him in now," she said. "Do not wait until morning." I packed the hospital bag with hands that moved faster than my thoughts. Chargers, medication list, insurance card, soft socks, crackers, Boden's blue blanket, Merritt's daycare form in case morning became complicated. Boden tried to stand and had to sit back down. His lips looked pale. I carried him halfway to the car even though he was getting too big for that and told him he could bring one radio. He brought the oldest one, the gray one with the recorder taped to the back because the battery door was broken. I buckled him in. Then I looked back at the house. Merritt's window was dark. That was when the problem became a wall. I could take Boden to the hospital. I could not leave Merrit alone. I could not wake her and drag her into an emergency room full of germs with her brother at risk. I needed one adult in a town where I had a mother, a stepfather, a sister, a brother-in-law, and a child's father. I called my mother first. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called Hale, nothing. I called Sable, nothing. I texted all 3. Boden has fever. St. Ansel says come now. Merrit is asleep. Can someone sit at the house until morning? Please. Then I called Renner, no answer. I called again because pride has no place when your child is hot and shaking in the back seat. This time, someone picked up, but it was not Renner, it was Kesslyn, and behind her I heard music, clapping, and the bright noise of a room where nobody was afraid. "Tess?" she said, like my name tasted inconvenient. "I need Renner," I said. "Boden has a fever. We have to go to St. Ansel right now. Merritt's asleep. I need someone to sit at the house." There was a pause, then a small laugh. She tried to hide by breathing through her nose. "We're at an event. I don't care where you are. His son is sick." The phone shifted. I heard Renner's voice, low and irritated. "What's going on?" I said it again, slower this time, because part of me still believed that if I explained the danger clearly enough, fatherhood would wake up in him. "Boden has a chemo fever. They said bring him now. I need someone at the house with Merrit." Renner sighed. Not panicked, not concerned. Tired, like I had asked him to move a couch. "Tess, this is not a good night. We're at something important." In the background, a woman laughed. Then Sable's voice, clear enough to slice through the music, said, "Don't start with her. She always turns everything into an emergency." I went still. "Sable is there?" Nobody answered that. Then Kesslyn came back on, sweet as poison. "Maybe if you had built a stable life, your kids wouldn't always be everyone else's problem." The line did not end right away. I heard applause rise behind her, someone saying, "Everyone look this way," and Renner muttering, "People are watching." Then the call disconnected. I sat in the driver's seat with the phone in my hand and my son burning behind me. A moment later, my mother finally texted back, "Not a call, not I'm coming, not is Boden breathing okay?" Just one sentence. "Tessara, emergencies do not make your choices our responsibility." That was the night I learned a strange thing about silence. Silence is not always empty. Sometimes silence has a full room behind it. Music playing, glasses lifting, people choosing not to hear you. I paid the neighbor's 17-year-old daughter $70. I did not have to sleep on my couch until morning. She came over in pajama pants and a school hoodie, scared but kind, and I could have kissed her forehead for answering the door. Then I drove to St. Ansel with one hand on the wheel and one hand reaching back whenever Boden made a sound. He tried to give a weather report from the back seat, but his voice kept breaking. "Storm warning," he whispered once. "Bad visibility." I told him we were almost there, even when we were not. Mothers do that. We turn miles into minutes and terror into instructions. Breathe in, breathe out. Look at me. Stay awake, baby. Stay with me. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Masks, blood cultures, antibiotics, nurses who knew how to be calm without being cold. Boden was admitted before dawn. His fever fought hard for 2 days. I sat beside him under fluorescent light, answering work emails on my phone, checking Merrit through the neighbor girl, and reading my mother's text so many times that the words stopped looking like English. Emergencies do not make your choices our responsibility. I had made choices, yes. I had chosen to keep my children fed after Renner left. I had chosen to work 2 jobs. I had chosen to learn the language of scans and ports and neutrophil counts. But I had not chosen cancer. Boden had not chosen pain. Merrit had not chosen to sleep through a night that would teach her mother who counted. On the 3rd morning, I met Odelia Brandt. Because I forgot our laundry, she owned Brandt Wash and Fold, a tired laundromat near the hospital motel strip, where the dryers rattled and the vending machine stole quarters. I had dropped off a bag of Boden's clothes and Merritt's blanket the day before, then lost track of time when his fever climbed again. Odelia appeared outside his hospital room, holding a clear plastic bag of folded laundry, like she delivered to children's oncology floors every day. She was 67, silver-haired, square-shouldered, with a face that looked built for telling the truth, whether you wanted it or not. "You forgot these," she said. I stood up too fast. "I'm sorry, I was going to come." "I figured you were busy keeping a child alive." She set the laundry in the chair. "You don't need to explain dirty laundry to a woman who has owned machines for 40 years. That was all. No hug, no pity, no story about her cousin's neighbor who had cancer and got better or didn't. She just brought clean clothes and left a card with her number on the windowsill. Later that week, she drove Merrit from daycare to the motel when my neighbor couldn't. The week after that, she started leaving rolls of quarters in my coat pocket and pretending they fell there. I tried to refuse once. She looked at me like I had insulted both of us and said, "Let people be useful. It keeps us from turning mean." A few days after Boden stabilized, I saw the photos. I was sitting in the Blue Finch Motel, eating cereal from a paper cup, when Sable posted an album from Mercy Hall. "Cedar Hollow Family Care Night," the banner said in navy letters, a fundraiser for local families facing medical hardship. There was my mother in pearls, smiling beside a donation basket. Hale stood behind her with his hands folded. Sable and Briggs held plates of tiny sandwiches. Renner had his arm around Kesslin near a table covered in paper lanterns. Everyone looked polished, generous, and warm. Under one photo, Sable had written, "Proud to stand for families who need us." I looked at the timestamp. Same night, same hour, same room I had heard through the phone while my son shook in the back seat. I did not comment. I took screenshots. Not because I had a plan, I took them because truth felt less lonely when it had somewhere to live. Boden came home thinner, slower, and quieter, but alive. Alive became the word I built every day around. He still needed treatment. He still had scans and pain and days when food tasted like metal. Merrit started waking at night and standing in my doorway without speaking, holding the red lunchbox against her chest. I learned not to ask too many questions. I would just lift the blanket and let her crawl in. During those months, we lived by small victories. One normal temperature, one paid electric bill, one morning where Boden wanted toast, one afternoon where Merrit laughed without checking my face first. The world did not become kind, but it became possible. Then in January, I found the recording. Boden was asleep on the couch, and I was cleaning the basket where he kept his storm things. The gray weather radio was there, with the little recorder still taped to the back. I pressed play because I expected to hear his serious voice talking about wind direction. Instead, I heard my own breathing. The car door, the phone ringing, my voice asking Renner for help. Kesslin saying, "Maybe if you had built a stable life, your kids wouldn't always be everyone else's problem." Renner saying, "People are watching." Sable in the background, "Don't answer her again. She always turns everything into an emergency." Then my own voice, smaller than I remembered, reading my mother's text aloud because I must have been trying to understand it. Emergencies do not make your choices our responsibility. I sat on the floor with the recorder in my lap until my legs went numb. I did not cry. Crying would have been too simple. This was colder than crying. This was hearing the exact shape of the room that had refused us. For months, I had wondered if maybe I remembered it worse than it was. If fear had sharpened the edges, if grief and exhaustion had made ordinary selfishness feel like cruelty. But there it was, in their own voices, with applause behind them. I saved the file to 3 places and named it, "The Night Nobody Came." Proof does not heal you. I learned that fast. Proof only stops you from calling pain confusion. It gives the wound a name, and sometimes a name is the first bandage. The lantern shelf began because another mother at St. Ansel cried over parking. Her baby was on the 4th floor. Her card had declined at the garage, and she was trying to decide whether to move her car and risk missing rounds or leave it and risk a ticket she could not pay. I gave her the parking voucher Marnix, the social worker, had given me that morning. It was my last one. I remember how her hand shook when she took it. That night, Odelia found me in the laundromat office staring at an empty wall while our clothes spun in the dryer. She did not ask what was wrong. She just unlocked the back room, an old office full of dust, broken hangers, and a metal desk with one missing drawer. "Put the things you needed in here," she said. "Someone else will need them by Friday." At first, it was nothing. A cardboard shelf, 3 gas cards, a jar of laundry quarters, a stack of hospital maps, peanut butter crackers, 2 clean blankets, a list of cheap motels that did not smell too much like smoke. Odelia taped a paper lantern to the window because Boden said people in storms need to see a light before they believe the road is still there. That is how it got its name. The lantern shelf. No board, no logo, no speech. Just a little room behind a laundromat where parents could take what they needed and leave what they could. Sometimes healing is not a grand return to who you were. Sometimes it is handing another person the thing you once begged for and discovering your hands still work. By spring, nurses knew about us. Marnix sent families with quiet nods. A church group dropped off freezer meals. Not Mercy Church. Another 1-2 towns over. A mechanic donated gas cards. A retired teacher made binders with treatment questions parents could bring to appointments. Boden designed weather report labels for the shelves. "Storm kit," he wrote on the box with blankets and flashlights. Merrit filled a basket with crayons and called it the waiting basket. I still worked too much. I still owed money. Boden was not magically cured because kindness entered the story. But something in our house changed. Help had a door now. It had a key. It had Odelia's laugh from the front room and the sound of quarters dropping into a jar. Almost a year after the emergency call, Tavy Rusk from the Cedar Hollow Ledger wrote about the lantern shelf. She was a sharp woman with short copper hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain, and she asked better questions than most people. She did not ask me to perform sadness. She asked what parents needed at midnight. I told her the truth: gas, laundry, someone to answer the phone. The article came out on a Sunday morning. Cedar Hollow Mother builds lifeline for cancer families. By Monday, a regional station called. By Wednesday, donations came from 3 counties. By Friday, my family remembered I existed. My mother texted first. "We always knew your pain would become purpose." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It had the same shape as love from far away, but none of the weight. Sable shared the article and wrote, "So proud of my little sister." Briggs offered in a private message to help organize the financial side, because things could get messy without proper structure. Renner called twice, then texted, "Would love to bring Boden by the center for some father-son support photos." Kesslin commented under the article with 3 white hearts and the words, "Beautiful mission." Not one of them said, "I am sorry I did not come." Not one wrote Boden's name without attaching themselves to it. They had found the light. They had not found the storm. The County Service Award came through Tavy. She said the commissioners wanted to honor the lantern shelf at the annual community banquet. I almost said no before she finished the sentence. Then she told me the banquet would be held at Mercy Hall. For a second, I could hear the old recording in my head. Applause, music, people are watching, same hall, same stage, same town. Life has a strange way of bringing you back to the room where you learn the truth and asking if you are ready to stand upright in it. Vondra called me 2 days before the banquet. I answered because I had stopped being afraid of her voice, and that felt like a victory I wanted to test. She sounded warm, careful, public. Tessara, honey, I think this award is a chance for healing. She said, it would mean a lot if you mentioned family support in your speech. People should know you are not alone. There are sentences so false they almost become funny. I looked across the room at Boden, who was building a tower of batteries on the kitchen table, and Merrit, who was drawing paper lanterns with orange crayons. I thought about the neighbor girl asleep on my couch, Odelia driving through sleet with clean laundry, Marnik sliding gas cards across a desk, strangers leaving quarters in a jar. I thought about my mother under that banner a year earlier, standing for families who needed help while refusing to sit in my house for one night. I'll tell the truth, I said. Vondra paused. Of course, but gently, to Sarah, some things don't need to be dragged into public. No, I said, some things don't, but some things are already public. People just don't know what they're looking at yet. She did not like that. I could hear it in the way her breathing changed. Before she could answer, I said goodbye and hung up. Then I took the gray recorder from the top drawer, checked the file, and put it in my purse, beside the screenshots from Mercy Hall and the first glass jar of laundry quarters. Not because I wanted revenge in the wild, hungry way people imagine it. I wanted accuracy. I wanted the room to stop applauding the wrong people. Calm truth is not weak. It only looks weak to people who depend on noise. A quiet sentence with evidence behind it can do what screaming never could. It can enter a room, sit down, and refuse to leave. Mercy Hall looked exactly the same as it had in the photos. Navy curtains, waxed floor, round tables with white cloths, paper lanterns hanging above the stage because someone thought that was a nice tribute and did not know how deep the symbol went. My family sat in the front row without being invited to sit there. Vondra wore cream. Hale looked at his program. Sable had her phone ready for pictures. Briggs nodded at donors like he knew them. Renner waved at Boden across the aisle with the confidence of a man who had not earned shyness. Kesslin smiled at Merrit and mouthed, "Hi, sweet girl," as if sweetness could be put on like lipstick. Boden sat beside Odelia. He was wearing a blue button-down shirt and a knit cap because his hair was still growing back uneven. Merrit sat on Odelia's other side with her red lunchbox in her lap. Odelia wore black slacks, a purple sweater, and the expression of a woman prepared to remove someone from a building if needed. That steadied me more than any prayer could have. When they called my name, the room clapped. I walked up with the jar of quarters in one hand and the recorder in the other. The award was glass and heavier than I expected. I set it on the podium because I needed both hands free. For a moment, I looked out at Cedar Hollow, teachers, nurses, church ladies, mechanics, parents from St. Ansel, commissioners, reporters, my family smiling like a painted window. Then I looked at Boden. He gave me a tiny weather announcer nod. I thanked the hospital staff first. I thanked Marnix for knowing that paperwork can be mercy when it is handed to the right person. I thanked parents who sleep in chairs and learn to count medicine by the hour. I thanked every person who had placed a gas card, blanket, freezer meal, or roll of quarters on our shelf. Then I lifted the jar. This was the first thing we collected, I said. Laundry quarters, not dramatic, not impressive. But if you have ever held a sick child's clothes in a plastic bag at 1 a.m, you know clean laundry can feel like proof that tomorrow still exists. People were quiet now, the good kind of quiet, the listening kind. The lantern shelf began because one night I needed one adult to sit in my house while I drove my son to St. Ansel with a chemo fever. I said, my little girl was asleep. I called the people most families are told to call first. No one came. The room changed. I did not look at Vondra. I did not need to. For a long time, I thought that was my private shame. I continued. I thought maybe needing help meant I had failed, but I was wrong. The shame did not belong to the person asking. It belonged to the people who heard and chose comfort. Vondra stood halfway. Tessara, she said softly, warning inside the softness. I pressed play. I did not play all of it. I was not cruel. I played 23 seconds. My voice saying Boden had a fever. Renner saying, this is not a good night. Kesslin saying, maybe if you had built a stable life, your kids wouldn't always be everyone else's problem. Sable in the background saying, don't answer her again. She always turns everything into an emergency. Then Renner, clear as a bell. People are watching. I stopped the recording. Nobody moved. Behind me on the screen, Tavi had helped me load one photo, the Mercy Hall fundraiser from that same night. Same banner, same smiling faces, Cedar Hollow Family Care Night. proud to stand for families who need us. I let the room see it. I let the silence do its work. Then I said, the lantern shelf was not built to punish them. It was built because that night taught me what families in crisis actually need. They do not need speeches about values. They need someone to answer. They need a couch watched, a tank filled, a blanket washed, a child remembered. They need care that does not ask if their emergency is convenient. My voice did not shake. That surprised me. So tonight, I am not thanking the people who ignored the call. I am thanking the people who answered after. Odelia Brandt, who brought clean laundry before she ever asked my last name. The neighbor girl who slept on my couch for $70 and more courage than most adults I knew. Marnix Cole, who treated gas cards like dignity, not charity. Every parent who has left a note on the shelf for the next parent coming through the storm. And my children, Boden and Merrit, who taught me that light does not have to be large to be real. The applause started in the back, small at first. Then it moved forward like weather. People stood. Not everyone. My family did not. But most of the room did, and I was glad Boden got to see it. I was glad Merrit saw adults stand for the truth without anyone yelling. I picked up the award, the jar, and the recorder, and I walked down from the stage without looking at the front row. They found me outside near the service entrance where the kitchen staff were stacking empty trays, and the summer air smelled like cut grass and coffee. Vondra came first, fast, her cream jacket open, her face no longer arranged for public use. Hale followed her. Sable and Briggs came behind, both pale. Renner looked angry in a way that made him seem almost relieved, as if anger was easier than shame. Keslin's eyes were bright, but I could not tell if she was crying or just furious that people had heard her clearly. "How could you do that to your own family?" Vondra said. I held the recorder in my hand. "Which part?" "You humiliated us." "No," I said. "I played what happened." Sable stepped forward. "That was private." "So was my son's fever." Briggs lowered his voice. "Tess, this can still be managed. You can say emotions were high. You can say it was misunderstood." Renner pointed toward the hall. "You just made it impossible for me to have a relationship with my son?" That was the only sentence that heated my blood. I looked at him carefully. "No, Renner, you did that before a room ever heard you." Keslin folded her arms. "You took one bad moment and built a whole sainthood out of it." "One bad moment," I said. "It was the moment I learned who would come if Boden needed help. That is not small to a mother." Vondra's anger shifted then. I watched it happen. Rage was not working, so she reached for grief. Her face softened. Her mouth trembled. She reached for my hand, and I moved it away before she touched me. "Tessara, we are still your family. We made mistakes, but you cannot shut us out forever. We want to be in your life. We want to be in Boden's life. Please. Let us fix this." There it was. The begging. Not on the night of fever. Not at the hospital. Not in the months of bills and scans and Merrit crying into her lunchbox. Now. After the applause. After the article. After the room knew their names without me even saying them. I looked at my mother and finally gave her back the sentence she had given me. "Emergencies do not make your choices my responsibility." She blinked like I had slapped her. "And your emergency tonight is your reputation," I said. "I am not coming." For once, Vondra had no soft sentence ready. Hale looked at me with wet eyes and opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Silence had been his lifelong shelter, and now it had become his confession. Sable whispered my name like a warning. Renner cursed under his breath. Keslin looked away first. I left them by the service entrance and went back inside for my children. Boden was tired, leaning against Odelia's side, but he smiled when he saw me. "Storm passed?" he asked. "Not all the way," I said, "but it moved." We went home under a sky full of low clouds. Merrit fell asleep in the back seat with her lunchbox on her lap. Boden stayed awake, watching the dark road. Halfway home, he said, "I didn't know the recorder got them." "I know." "Are you mad?" I thought about that. I was. I still am sometimes. "Good," he said, with the serious wisdom of an 8-year-old who had spent too much time around adults pretending not to feel things. "They were mean." I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was true and simple, and children can sometimes cut through a year of pain with 3 plain words. Life did not become perfect after that night. People like clean endings because they make pain look obedient. But real life does not close that neatly. Boden still had appointments. Merrit still checked the driveway when I left too fast. I still worked too many hours, though the lantern shelf began paying me a small salary once Tavy helped us set up a proper nonprofit board with no Briggs anywhere near it. My family sent messages for a while. Some angry, some wounded, some dressed up as apologies but carrying blame underneath. I did not block them. I turned the notifications off. There is a difference between hatred and distance. Hatred keeps a chair open for someone in your mind. Distance folds the chair and puts it away. The lantern shelf grew into 2 rooms, then 3. Odelia gave up the storage area behind the dryers and pretended it was no sacrifice. Parents came in at all hours with hospital bracelets still on their wrists. Some took gas cards, some took blankets. Some just stood by the shelves and cried because asking strangers was easier than asking people who should have loved them. We kept a sign near the door in Boden's handwriting. Take what keeps you going, leave what you can, no explaining required. One Sunday, almost a year after the banquet, Boden recorded a new weather report at the little desk by the window. His hair had come back darker. His face had filled out. He still got tired faster than other kids, and I still woke some nights to check his breathing. But he was there. Merrit sat on the floor sorting donated crayons by color. Odelia was in the front room arguing with a dryer. I was labeling envelopes for gas cards when Boden pressed record and put on his announcer voice. Storm passed east of Cedar Hollow, he said. Damage still visible, lights coming back on. I stopped writing. He looked up. Was that good? I had to turn away for a second. Yes, I said. That was exactly right. Family, I learned, is not the person who smiles beside you when the cameras are on. It is not the person who shares your blood and disappears when your need becomes inconvenient. Family is the person who answers when the room is dark, the child is sick, and you have nothing left to offer but need. My mother wanted back into my life after the storm had passed. My sister wanted the photo after the work was done. Renner wanted fatherhood once fatherhood had an audience. Kesslin wanted her words erased once the room heard them clearly. But the lantern shelf was not built for people who only love you in good lighting. It was built for the ones still driving through bad weather, one hand on the wheel, one hand reaching back toward a child they are terrified to lose. And if my family ever wonders why I did not open the door when they begged to come in, the answer is simple. On the night my son fought cancer, I called. They heard. They chose not to answer. So when their turn came to need me, I let the silence speak in the language they had taught me first. Commentary, discussion, explanation, and life lessons. All right, let's talk about this story properly, because this is the kind of story where the real pain is not only in what happened, but in what people chose not to do. And sometimes what people do not do tells us more about them than any speech, any promise, or any family photo ever could. At the center of this story, we have Tessara Wrenlow, a mother who is not asking for luxury. She is not asking for a miracle. She is not even asking her family to carry the full weight of her son's illness. She is asking for one simple thing: one adult to sit in her house while her son Boden is in danger. That is what makes this story so painful. The request is small, but the refusal is enormous. And that is the first thing we need to understand. Sometimes the size of the betrayal is not measured by what you asked for. It is measured by how easily someone refused it. Now think about the emergency itself. Boden is a child fighting cancer. His fever is not a normal fever. For a child going through chemo, a fever can become life-threatening very quickly. Tess knows this. She is not being dramatic. She is not exaggerating. She is a mother who understands that every minute matters. At the same time, her little daughter Merrit is asleep at home. So Tess is trapped between 2 responsibilities: protect the sick child in the car and protect the little girl sleeping in the house. That is not a normal parenting problem. That is a crisis no person should have to solve alone. And this is where the story starts exposing people. Tess calls her mother, no answer. She calls her stepfather, no answer. She calls her sister, no answer. She calls her ex-husband, no real help. But the worst part is not that they miss the call. The worst part is where they are when the call comes. They are at Mercy Hall, dressed up, standing under a public message about helping families in medical crisis. That contrast is brutal. They are celebrating the idea of compassion while refusing the actual practice of compassion. Let's pause there, because that is a major point. A lot of people love the image of being good. They love the public version of kindness. They love the photo, the caption, the applause, the community respect. But when kindness becomes inconvenient, when kindness requires them to leave the room, miss the picture, drive across town, sit on a couch, or answer a frightened mother, suddenly their kindness disappears. That is not kindness. That is branding. Vondra, Tess's mother, is the clearest example of this. She knows how to look respectable. She knows how to sound gentle. She knows how to stand near donation baskets and appear caring. But when her own daughter needs help, she sends a sentence so cold it almost sounds like a policy statement. Emergencies do not make your choices our responsibility. Now, that line deserves attention. It is not just mean, it is carefully mean. Vondra does not simply say, "I cannot come." She turns the emergency into Tess's fault. She makes a child's cancer crisis sound like the natural result of bad life planning. That is psychological cruelty. It puts shame on the person who is already drowning. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some families do this all the time. They do not want to say, "I abandoned you." So they say, "You made bad choices." They do not want to admit, "I did not want to help." So they say, "You need to be responsible." They turn their lack of compassion into a lecture about your character. That way, they can sleep at night. Renner's failure is also important. He is not just some distant relative. He is Boden's father. That means the emergency is his emergency too. But when Tess reaches him, his concern is not Boden's body, Boden's fever, or Boden's fear. His concern is the event. His concern is the people watching, and when he says, "People are watching," he accidentally tells the whole truth about himself. He is more loyal to his image than to his son. That one line tells us everything. Because a real parent does not ask, "How will this look?" when a child is in danger. A real parent asks, "Where do you need me?" Renner does not ask that. He measures the cost to his public comfort, and he chooses the room over the child. Then we have Kesslin. Her cruelty is sharper because she says what the others are thinking but trying to hide. Maybe if you had built a stable life, your kids wouldn't always be everyone else's problem. This is the kind of sentence that pretends to be about responsibility, but it is really about contempt. She is not offering wisdom. She is ranking herself above Tess. She is saying, "Your struggle proves you are beneath me." But this story challenges that idea completely. Tess is not weak because she needs help. Tess is human. She is a mother in a medical emergency. Needing support in that moment is not failure. Refusing support in that moment is the failure. Sable's background comment also matters. She always turns everything into an emergency. That is another kind of family cruelty. It is the label. Families sometimes label the person they do not want to hear. They call her dramatic, too emotional, too needy, too much. And once they give her that label, they no longer have to respond to the actual facts. Even if a child is sick, even if the hospital says, "Come now," even if the danger is real, the label does all the work. "She is dramatic" becomes the excuse for not showing up. That is why Tess's pain is so layered. She is not only fighting cancer with her son, she is fighting the story her family has built around her. They have decided she is the unstable one, the embarrassing one, the complicated one, and because they have decided that, they feel free to ignore her. Now let's talk about Boden's recorder, because that is one of the most powerful parts of the story. Boden loves storms. He records little weather reports. That detail seems innocent at first, almost sweet. But later, it becomes the object that preserves the truth. The child who loves tracking storms accidentally records the emotional storm around his own family. That is not just a plot twist. That is symbolism. The recorder captures what Tess might have spent years questioning. Because when people hurt you and then act normal later, you start to wonder if maybe you remembered it wrong. Maybe you were too scared. Maybe you were too emotional. Maybe it was not as cruel as it felt. That is what abandonment can do. It makes you doubt your own memory. But the recording stops that. It gives Tess something solid. It says, "No, this happened. These were the words. This was the room. This was the laughter. This was the choice." And notice something else. Tess does not immediately use the recording to destroy them. She saves it. She names it. She carries it. That matters because the story is not about instant revenge. It is about slow clarity. Tess does not become powerful because she attacks. She becomes powerful because she stops being confused. Now we move to Odelia, and Odelia is the emotional opposite of Tess's blood family. Odelia does not enter the story with a big speech. She does not say, "I am here to save you." She brings laundry, she gives quarters, she unlocks an old room behind a laundromat. Her help is plain, practical, and deeply human. This is one of the biggest lessons in the story. Real love is often practical. It is not always dramatic. It does not always come with tears or perfect words. Sometimes love is clean clothes, sometimes it is a ride, sometimes it is a couch watched until morning. Sometimes it is someone saying, "You do not need to explain." Odelia understands something Vondra never understands. When someone is in crisis, do not make them perform their pain before you help them. Do not make them prove they are worthy. Do not make them beg in a more acceptable tone. Just help. The lantern shelf is born from that idea. And this is where Tess's character becomes truly powerful. She takes the exact emptiness she experienced and fills it for someone else. She needed gas cards, so she collects gas cards. She needed laundry help, so she creates laundry help. She needed practical guidance, so she builds lists and resources. She needed one adult to answer, so she builds a place that answers. That is not ordinary revenge. That is transformation. And this is where the story becomes bigger than family drama. Tess does not heal by pretending nothing happened. She heals by turning pain into service. But not in a fake inspirational way. The story does not say pain is beautiful. It says pain is painful. But if you survive it, you may understand a need that other people overlook. Tess sees what families in cancer treatment actually need, because she has been that mother in the parking lot, that mother counting dollars, that mother holding dirty laundry and fear at the same time. Now, when the article comes out and the lantern shelf becomes known, the family suddenly returns. This is not an accident. This is another revelation. They did not come back when Boden was in danger. They did not come back when Tess was exhausted. They did not come back when Merrit was scared. They came back when the room changed. They came back when Tess's pain became respected. They came back when being connected to her had value. That is why their return feels so insulting. They do not want to repair the wound. They want to stand beside the recovery. They want access to the part of Tess's life that looks admirable, but they refuse the part that was frightening, expensive, and inconvenient. Vondra wants to be thanked. Sable wants to be publicly proud. Briggs wants influence. Renner wants fatherhood with an audience. Kesslin wants her cruelty erased under a pretty comment. None of them begins with a real apology. None of them says, "We failed you." They want the benefits of reconciliation without the honesty of accountability. This is very common in toxic family systems. People do not always return because they changed. Sometimes they return because you changed. You became stronger, more respected, more stable, less easy to dismiss. And suddenly, they want to rewrite the past so they can belong to your future. That brings us to Mercy Hall. The location is extremely important. The final public moment happens in the same kind of space where the betrayal first happened. That gives the story a full circle structure. 1 year earlier, Mercy Hall was the place where compassion was performed while Tess was abandoned. 1 year later, it becomes the place where the performance is interrupted by truth. And Tess's speech is powerful because she does not overplay it. She thanks the right people. She honors the real helpers. She explains what the lantern shelf means. Then she reveals the truth calmly. She plays only a short part of the recording. That restraint makes her stronger. She is not trying to humiliate them for entertainment. She is correcting the story in a room where lies had been rewarded. This is an important lesson for anyone watching. Truth does not need to be exaggerated when the facts are strong enough. Tess does not need to insult them. She does not need to shout. She lets their own voices speak, and when the room hears the recording, the shame moves. For a long time, Tess carried the shame of needing help. But in that moment, the shame returns to where it belongs. The people who refused her are exposed not because Tess invented anything, but because they finally have to stand next to their own choices. After the event, the family's reaction tells us they still do not understand. They accuse Tess of humiliating them. That is their first concern. Not Boden, not Merrit, not the pain they caused, their public image. This proves the whole point of the story. Even after hearing themselves, even after the truth is undeniable, their first instinct is self-protection. When Sable says the recording was private, Tess's response cuts deep. So was my son's fever. That line matters because it exposes the hypocrisy of privacy. People often demand privacy after they have caused private harm. They do not want the truth public because public truth creates consequences. But Tess did not expose a harmless secret. She exposed a private cruelty that had public lies built on top of it. Then Vondra finally begs. But even her begging is late. She says they are still family. She wants back in. She wants to fix it. But fixing something requires admitting what broke it. She has not done that. She wants reunion without repentance. And Tess's final response is the emotional climax. Emergencies do not make your choices my responsibility. And your emergency tonight is your reputation. I am not coming. That line works because it mirrors Vondra's original cruelty, but it does not copy the cruelty. Tess is not refusing to help a sick child. She is refusing to save adults from the consequences of abandoning one. That distinction is everything. This is not revenge in the loud sense. It is not destruction for pleasure. It is a boundary. It is Tess saying, "You taught me I could survive without you. Now do not be surprised that I continued." The ending with Boden's weather report gives the story a softer landing. Storm passed east of Cedar Hollow. Damage still visible? Lights coming back on? That is not a fairy tale ending. It is better than that. It is honest. The storm did not leave everything untouched. Boden is still healing. Merrit still carries fear. Tess still remembers. But the lights are coming back on. That means survival has begun to feel like life again. So what do we take from this story? First, a crisis reveals who is real. Not who talks the best, not who posts the prettiest, not who uses the word family the most. The real ones are the people who answer when helping you gives them nothing. Second, needing help is not shame. Everyone needs help at some point. The shame belongs to people who hear a reasonable cry for help and choose image over compassion. Third, practical kindness is powerful. The lantern shelf is built from small things. Quarters, blankets, gas cards, maps, lists. But small things become sacred when they arrive at the right moment. Fourth, you do not owe people access to your healing just because they knew you during your pain. If they abandoned you in the hard part, they do not automatically get a seat in the beautiful part. Fifth, truth spoken calmly can be stronger than anger. Tess does not win because she becomes loud. She wins because she becomes clear. And finally, family is not proven by blood. Family is proven by response. Who answers? Who comes? Who stays? Who helps without turning your suffering into a debt? Those are the people who deserve the word. That is why this story stays with us. It is not only about cancer, betrayal, or public exposure. It is about the quiet moment when a woman stops begging the wrong people to love her correctly. It is about a mother who learns that the people who ignored her call do not get to claim her life once it becomes admirable. And it is about a small light in a laundromat window, reminding every exhausted parent who walks in that somewhere, someone finally answered. The end.